do see too that this chart did reveal to me a couple interesting things about what I think are foundational, fundamental tensions in existence. And I think it's kind of interesting. It's like on this side, we have the physical. On this side, we have the ethereal. On this side, we have the physical represented in being as an individual person, let's say. And then over here, we have the collective. And another way of looking at this is like, this would be the perspective if you're looking at individual cells of a body or individual concepts and ideas of a culture. So this is the collective. This is the individual. And, I feel like biologically speaking, in the ecosystem, all of nature, and I guess, especially people, are in an eternal battle of the individual versus the collective. When I say a battle, I mean that there's like a tension happening. In the same way that there's a tension between the big 5 personality traits in different ways. If you're too high in openness, it's hard to be conscientious. And if you're too high in being conscientious, it's hard to be open to new ideas. And so in that same way, like I really feel like nature exists in this tension between the individual and the collective. And I feel like you see this in insects in a really profound way. Some insects have decided, you could say, is it a decision? Maybe. Some insects have decided, no individuality. We're just going to go with the collective approach. You're talking about bees, ants, hive animals, where everything's being run by an authoritarian dictator, the queen. It's interesting that it's a queen too. And it seems to work really well, but the individuals are very often sacrificed for the greater good of the whole. There's this eternal struggle between the collective and the individual. And in human beings, this is obvious, right? Like, and the story of America breaking away from feudal Europe, to me, is the story of this eternal battle reaching a stalemate. People had decided through exploring philosophy that the most balanced and stable structure would be one that's based on the individual and not the collective, because I think it was sort of discovered that there's this idea that if you protect the group at all costs, you sacrifice the individual. But if you protect the individual at all costs, this actually protects the collective. So it is does seem to be a fundamental rule of the cosmos that the only way to truly protect the group is by protecting each individual within it. And that seems to be sort of the main thrust of like the American experiment, or the experiment of common law, is that you need to protect individual rights, and that you can't just sacrifice people because of the greater good. If people choose to sacrifice themselves for the greater good, that's different. But it can't be by force. You can't forcibly, or you shouldn't. People do. It's kind of interesting that played out in the 20th century as liberty or individualism in America versus collectivism in the Soviet Union and other places. Self-determination versus, sort of collective authoritarianism, where with individualism, people are free to innovate and choose their own path, is sort of a product of, whatever inspires them. Versus collectivism, which is like, well, to each according to his needs. And, you got this bureaucracy that's like, well, you have a good mind for math, so you're going to be a mathematician or whatever, rather than letting people sort of determine their own path.